Disclaimer: this story is based on real events shared for the purpose of storytelling and learning. Names and details have been changed to protect the privacy of the individuals involved. Viewer discretion is advised due to mature themes. He wasn't supposed to be home. That was the plan, simple, predictable. Every Thursday, without fail, he worked late. It had become a routine, almost like clockwork. I never imagined that one evening, one unexpected decision could bring everything crashing down. But that's exactly what happened. It started off like any other quiet evening. The house was still, the dim light from the living room casting long shadows across the floor. I was pacing slowly, nervously, going over everything in my mind like I always did when I thought about the choices I'd made. It had been years of hiding, of pretending, of smiling through guilt and living with a truth I never had the courage to say out loud. But that night, everything was about to change. I still remember the exact moment the front door creaked open. That sound, it was like thunder in the silence. My heart dropped. My whole body froze. I wasn't expecting anyone. Not at that time. And certainly not him. He walked in calmly, casually. At first, I thought maybe he forgot something and came back. But then our eyes met, and I saw it instantly. That flicker of confusion, followed by something deeper. His gaze scanned the room, and for a second, I could see the questions forming in his mind. He wasn't angry yet, he was just trying to understand. But I knew what he'd just stepped into. And I knew there was no going back. For years, I had kept a part of my life locked away. A part of me I never shared. Some people cheat because they want something more. Some cheat because they feel something missing. For me, it was complicated. It started with small lies, white lies really. Harmless, I told myself. Just coffee with a friend. Just one dinner. Just a message. Until it wasn't harmless anymore. I'd created a second life, a quiet, hidden corner of my world that gave me what I felt I couldn't ask for in my real one. I told myself it wasn't betrayal if no one knew. I told myself I deserved it, that I was still a good person. But now, standing in that moment, watching him put the pieces together, I realized how deep I'd gone into the lie. And how much it was about to cost me. He took a step forward, his voice low and steady. Who else is here? That question hit like a slap. Because the truth was, I wasn't alone. And he knew. Somewhere in his gut, he knew something was wrong. Something didn't fit. And I could see the hurt already starting to surface, even before I said a word. Even before he opened the bedroom door. You see, people think the hardest part of infidelity is the guilt. But it's not. It's the moment everything breaks open, the moment the other person sees you differently. Not as their partner. Not as the person they trusted. But as a stranger. A liar. Someone they never really knew. I wanted to stop time. I wanted to freeze that night, rewind it, erase it. But it was too late. The door was open. The truth was out. And I was standing there with nothing left to hide behind. No excuse that could make it better. No explanation that could take away the look on his face. What happened next? I never saw it coming. Because in that moment, when he walked in too soon, when my secret was seconds from being fully exposed, he didn't scream. He didn't cry. He just stood there. Quiet. Staring. And then, he did something that changed everything. But I'll tell you that part in the next episode. He didn't say a word. Just stood there, frozen. His eyes didn't even move at first. It was like he was trying to process what he was seeing, but his brain refused to believe it. My heart was racing. I couldn't breathe. Every second stretched like an hour. And then, slowly, he turned his head toward the bedroom door, toward the part of the house I never thought he'd walk into without warning. I wanted to speak, to say something, anything, but no words came. What could I even say? Sorry? Please don't look in there? It was pointless. The truth was sitting there in that room, waiting to be seen. All I could do was watch. He took a step forward, not fast, not angry, just deliberate. And that's what made it worse. He wasn't shouting, throwing things, demanding answers. He was calm. Too calm. Like he'd already disconnected from the person I used to be in his eyes. That kind of silence, it's terrifying. But before he could reach the door, he stopped. He turned around and looked straight at me. Not with hatred. Not even pain. Just disbelief. "How long?" he asked, quietly. That question cut deeper than I was ready for. Because it wasn't just about what I'd done, it was about how long I'd been lying to him, right to his face, while sharing the same bed, the same life. I hesitated. And in that pause, everything changed. He didn't wait for my answer. He just nodded to himself, like he already knew. Maybe he'd been ignoring signs for a while. Maybe deep down, he suspected something. I'll never know. What I do know is that moment, that stillness, was worse than any fight we could have had. Let me take you back a little. Give you a better picture of how we got here. We'd been together for almost 10 years. Married for 6. To the outside world, we looked perfect. Smiling photos, happy vacations, shared goals. But on the inside, we were slowly drifting. The little things started to fade, the affection, the conversations, the excitement. We weren't fighting all the time. We weren't unhappy, exactly. We were just distant. And then I met someone. It wasn't planned. It was a friend of a friend, someone I bumped into at a coffee shop a few times. We started talking, casually at first. Just small talk, harmless compliments. But over time, those conversations became something I looked forward to more than anything else in my day. He made me feel seen. Not just noticed, but understood. Like he was listening to the parts of me my husband hadn't heard in years. I know how that sounds. I know it's no excuse. But when you've gone so long feeling invisible in your own home, even a little attention can feel like oxygen. What started as messages turned into calls. Then dinners. Then secrets. And every step I took, I told myself it wasn't serious. That I could stop anytime. That I had control. But the truth was, I was falling deeper into something I couldn't explain, even to myself. I became two people. The wife who smiled, cooked dinner, talked about weekend plans. And the woman who kept checking her phone when no one was looking. I convinced myself I could manage it. That no one would get hurt if I was careful. But secrets have a way of slipping through the cracks, no matter how tightly you seal them. And now here we were. All those choices, all those quiet betrayals, had finally caught up to me. And the man who had trusted me with everything was standing just a few feet away, about to see the one thing I never wanted him to find. But still, he didn't open the door. He just stood there. And then, he did something completely unexpected. But that part, that's coming next. He didn't open the door. He just looked at it, then looked back at me. His face was blank, but his eyes said everything. And then, without a word, he turned around and walked toward the kitchen. I stood there, frozen, still waiting for something to explode, for him to yell, to demand answers, to finally let all the anger out. But he didn't. The quiet was worse than screaming. I followed him slowly, unsure of what he was doing. He poured himself a glass of water like it was any normal evening. I wanted to ask what was going on, but my throat felt dry, like my body knew I didn't deserve to speak. He finally looked up and asked, "So this is who you are now?" That one sentence felt heavier than anything I'd ever heard. I didn't have an answer. Not one that would make sense. Not one that would undo the damage. While he stood there in silence, I kept thinking back to all the moments I should have been honest. Times when he asked if everything was okay, when he noticed my phone always face down, when he asked why I was out late or why I'd suddenly started working weekends. I lied so easily back then. I told myself I was protecting him. But really, I was protecting myself from shame, from guilt, from the reality I didn't want to face. And it wasn't just about me and him. There were other layers. Our families were close. We had friends who saw us as the perfect couple. We were the ones people came to for advice, the ones others looked up to. That image became a mask, and I wore it so well. But behind that mask, I was unraveling. And he had no idea. I also kept thinking about the other man. The one who'd slowly become a bigger part of my life than I ever planned. It wasn't love, at least, not in the way you're supposed to love someone. It was escape. A place to hide from everything I felt I couldn't face in my marriage. He knew about my situation. He never asked for promises, never pressured me. But deep down, I think we both knew we were playing with fire. And that night, it finally caught up with us. As I stood in the kitchen with my husband, still not knowing what he was going to do, my phone buzzed on the counter. I didn't have to look to know who it was. He saw it too. His eyes glanced at the screen, then back at me. He didn't say a word. He just walked past me and into the living room, like the conversation was over before it ever really began. But it wasn't over. Not even close. Because what I didn't know yet was that he had secrets too. Secrets that had been buried for years. And soon, they were going to change everything. He sat on the couch, his back to me, staring straight ahead at nothing. The air between us felt sharp, like if either of us spoke, everything would break wide open. I stayed standing in the kitchen, holding onto the edge of the counter, trying to steady myself, trying to make sense of what was happening, of what wasn't happening. This wasn't how I imagined it going. I thought he'd demand answers, accuse me, fall apart. But the silence was worse. It felt like a storm about to hit, but with no warning of how strong it would be. Then he said something I'll never forget. "Do you think you're the only one who's been hiding something?" I didn't know what he meant. At first, I thought it was just anger talking, a way to throw blame back at me. But then he stood up and faced me, finally, really faced me. And in his eyes, I didn't just see pain. I saw something else. A kind of distance, like part of him had already left this relationship long before tonight. I asked him what he meant, my voice barely holding steady. He didn't answer. He just picked up his phone, scrolled through it, and then placed it on the table. "You're not the only one who's been lying." My heart started pounding again, but in a different way this time. Because suddenly, I wasn't just scared of what I'd done, I was scared of what I didn't know. He had a secret too. Maybe more than one. And now everything I thought I had control over was slipping away. He walked toward the bedroom door, the one I thought he'd opened earlier, but didn't. And just before reaching it, he stopped and looked over his shoulder. "You might want to tell him to leave before things get worse." That moment, everything went still. Because how did he know? And more importantly, what else did he know that I didn't? Something was coming. Something I wasn't ready for. I didn't move. I couldn't. My legs felt rooted to the ground, my mind spinning with what he'd just said. "You might want to tell him to leave before things get worse." The way he said it, so calm, so sure, chilled me more than if he'd screamed. He knew. He'd known. And not just tonight. Maybe for longer than I realized. I rushed to the bedroom door, panic rising in my throat. I opened it just enough to whisper, "You need to go. Now." No questions, no arguments. He must have seen the fear in my face, because he didn't say a word. He just slipped out the back quietly, like he was never there. When I turned around, my husband was holding his phone again, only this time, it wasn't just to prove a point. He made a call. I couldn't hear the full conversation, but I caught one sentence that made my stomach twist. "Yeah, it's time. Tell her I'll be by tomorrow to talk about the rest." I stepped forward, my voice shaky. "Who are you calling?" He ended the call without answering. Then he looked at me with something I couldn't place, sadness, maybe, but also something colder. "You've been busy sneaking around," he said. "But so have I." It didn't make sense. He'd always seemed distant lately, sure, but I never imagined he could have been hiding something of his own. And then, like it was nothing, he added, "You're not the only one who found someone else." That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about what I'd done. This was something bigger. He'd been waiting for this moment. Planning for it. And I had walked right into it without even knowing. But the real shock was still coming. He didn't wait for me to respond. He walked past me, grabbed his jacket from the chair, and headed for the door. I'll be gone for the night, he said quietly, but tomorrow we talk for real. I stood there stunned, heart racing, wondering what he meant by he found someone else. Was he bluffing? Trying to hurt me back? Or had I been blind to everything, the same way he'd been blind to me? The next day, he came home calm, too calm. We sat across from each other at the table, like strangers. He looked me in the eye and said, "Her name's Mia. We've been talking for 8 months. She works with me." Nothing physical ever happened, but it could have. And I think I wanted it to. I didn't know what to say. My stomach turned. It felt like the ground had shifted. I had been so consumed by my own secret life, I hadn't even noticed I wasn't the only one slipping away. And then came the twist. He reached into a drawer, pulled out a small manila envelope, and slid it across the table. "I hired a private investigator 3 months ago," he said. "I've known about everything. Every meeting. Every message." I opened the envelope, hands shaking. Inside were photos. Dates. Screenshots. Proof. He didn't yell. He didn't cry. He just watched me as I went cold. "I wasn't waiting to catch you," he said. "I was waiting to decide if I wanted to become you or leave you." He stood up slowly. And then he walked away, leaving the door open behind him. I sat at that table for what felt like hours, the envelope still open in front of me. Everything I had hidden was now exposed, laid out in cold, undeniable facts. And yet, the part that hurt the most wasn't the photos or the evidence. It was knowing that while I was busy protecting my secret, he had been silently deciding if I was even worth saving. He didn't come back that night. Or the night after. A week passed before we spoke again. No shouting. No dramatic goodbye. Just quiet, honest words, something we hadn't shared in years. We agreed to separate. Not out of hate, but because we both realized something painful and true. We had let the love fade long before the lies began. I never saw the other man again. Whatever connection we had wasn't real. It was just a distraction from the emptiness I didn't want to face. I had to look at myself after all of it. Really look. And what I saw was someone who needed to grow, to heal, to learn how to be honest, not just with others, but with herself. Infidelity isn't just a betrayal of someone else. It's a betrayal of the version of you that once believed in loyalty, in trust, in love that endures. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that secrecy never saves a relationship, it only delays the breaking point. And when the truth finally comes out, it changes everything. Forever. 3.